707. I'm Daedalus Howell, and we have Nancy Dobbs in the house. She's the CEO and president of KRCB, both TV and radio,
That's right.
Eventually all media known to mankind.
Yeah, sure. Web, everything, exactly.
Yeah, but you're sort of like the doyen of local broadcast.
Well, thank you.
This was such an interesting initiative back in late 70s, early 80s.
1981.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What precipitated it?
Well, the precipitous event was a professor at Sonoma State University was at the White House Office of Telecommunications on sabbatical under Carter. And
Carter?
Yeah, I remember Carter. And he, this professor, discovered that the channel 22 had been assigned to the North Bay, to Katati specifically, and no one had ever applied for it. So he came back and said, well, what do you think? We got together a group of business people and government people and teachers and social activists and so on, said, would the North Bay, would Sonoma County support its own public broadcasting station? Because even then, and it more so even than now, Sonoma County and the North Bay was very isolated from the media market of the Bay Area.
Right.
In other words, it was very difficult to get broadcast signals up here. But even when you did, basically they would pay attention to the North Bay when there was a crisis or a tragedy or something like that. But they weren't paying attention to the day-to-day life of the North Bay.
And this is prior to the proliferation of cable and that
Exactly.
kind of thing.
There was very little cable penetration outside of the very immediate cities along 101, and no satellite, so there weren't many options. So the answer seemed to be yes, it would be a good idea. The original idea, in fact, was to really partner with KQED and pick up and rebroadcast their signal so we wouldn't have to invest in building a whole studio and so on.
As a sort of repeater station.
A repeater, and then drop in local programming. Amongst other things, all of the schools in Western Marin and Western Sonoma County had no access to educational television. So that was another, it was about 250,000 homes without access to public broadcasting when we went on the air.
So you're saying there's no Sesame Street?
Right. And no Mr. Rogers, none of the really important, seminal, important early childhood education.
And landmark programming too.
Absolutely landmark. So they were looking to do a little community ascertainment, and if it looked like the community agreed that it was an idea that could go forward, then they would apply for a license and go forward from there. And so they hired me in January of '81 to basically do that community ascertainment, and it turned out indeed that the community was saying, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, and so we went forward.
But your commitment at the time was only to be about 6 months. Did you realize that you
would
spend 30 years?
Yeah, it was to be 6 months because I don't come from a broadcast background. I'd worked for the legislature, and
you were a speechwriter at one point.
I was a speechwriter for my member, and worked for the Assembly Health Committee, and and when you work for a member of the Assembly, you do speechwriting, you do public outreach, you do community organizing, you do fundraising at certain times of the year.
So you're kind of perfect for the job.
And the other thing that I think was actually more attractive to them was that once you work with the government, you're not afraid to pick up the phone to the FCC and say, what the heck is going on, And so much of it in early days is that. Is dealing with the government and the process and the bureaucracy. So yeah, it was a good combination for what was needed. And they said, don't worry, we'll get somebody who knows broadcast in 6 months. Just let's get this going. So I guess I got bitten by the bug, and it's actually been an unusual opportunity in this day and age to start with something that many years ago and still be here now and watch it through the changes and the growth and the exciting and the scary times. We had a lot of really scary times in the beginning.
In local media, you're the only one who started with something and remains with it. I can't think of any entity for at least that duration. Even print journalism has, our press network has changed hands 5 times.
Right. Well, Gordon Slott and KCST.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
So Gordon was on the air. They were on the air at KCST before we are. I'm not sure, honestly, how much Gordon is still involved with KCST, but I'm sure he's still a partial owner. But yeah, in terms of front rank, making the thing work from day to day, it's been it's odd. You look around, and it's the same thing. When we went on the air, there were 4 PBS stations in the Bay Area, and now there's 2.
Right.
us and KQED. So there's been enormous change in broadcast and, as you say, print media.
And then you added the radio station.
We did.
About midstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10 years on, so 20 years ago, we put the radio station on the air. We had dreamt about putting a radio station on the air from the beginning, because as we've learned, I certainly didn't know it, but radio is so much more personal and so much more available to a community and so much cheaper to produce programming on.
Yeah.
And so we were doing okay 10 years in with the television station, but when we put the radio station on the air, it was as if all of a sudden people knew we existed.
Right.
Because people identify with, they hear a voice, people are on the radio much more frequently than they are on television, and so it's much more local.
And the format has changed over the years. It's evolved a couple of times.
Actually, when we went on the air, we were a classical radio station, because just literally days before we went on the air, KQED dropped all of their classical music and went to all talk, KQED radio, obviously.
Right, so
now.
That's a great opportunity for you guys.
It was enormous, and we've been thinking in that direction anyway, and so perfect. So we were a classical radio station up until about 4 years ago, and we've always had a very challenged situation with a very small signal, very small coverage area. But at about 4 years ago, it became 10 times worse, because USC bought a radio station in Napa County,
right.
And that reaches much of the Bay Area. And USC has a very fine classical service, and they were just picking it up and rebroadcasting it on the station up here. I don't know if that's still what they're doing.
I think in part.
Yeah. So we just couldn't compete. There was no way. I mean, people say we love you, but it's much easier to listen to this other station.
Why do you guys have such a small signal? Because I know your TV is everywhere.
TV is all 9 Bay Area counties.
Yeah.
That was all that was left when we finally got a license. There's flamethrower public radio stations in the Bay Area. Besides KQED, there's KCSM, which is San Mateo, but their signal is a protected signal all the way to Rohnert Park. And then there's KPFA. And when you have, that's just 3 signals, but when you have signals that are that large and protected that far away, it disallows other frequencies because of interference. And the only reason why we finally got it, 91.1, was because a Christian station a Christian group had been planning to put the station on the air and never got around to it, and gave it back to the FCC. So we got a license, but it's 100 watts. Right. Your light bulbs are more than 100 watts. So we're on Geyser Peak, so it's a good transmission site.
Yeah.
But so we've tried for years and years and years to get another station. We finally got a repeater downtown Santa Rosa here on 90.9.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but we finally said, why are we beating our heads against the wall? And we've developed an app, and we're using the television station to promote the app as a way to listen to the station. And of course we stream, but it's tough.
Yeah, and also things are changing in the way that people consume media. So it's cool that you guys are moving to an app, because I think that's kind of where it's at in some ways. And I think we should take a break, but when we come back, let's talk about the future of media and how it's changed around us. Talking with Nancy Dobbs. She's the president and CEO of KRCB and all of its enterprises. We'll be right back on 707. We're back on 707. We've got Nancy Dobbs here. She's the president and CEO of KRCB, and just an incredible journey in terms of what you've witnessed putting together your stations and how they've evolved and where they're evolving to next. In the last segment, we left off where you guys were launching an app, which is awesome because everything's changed. It's podcasts and it's streaming TV and all that.
Yes, indeed.
How does a local PBS affiliate and NPR affiliate fit into this equation now of our media diets?
Well, I think as always through our last 35 years, we have to spend a little moment to watching and seeing what really is going to be the next step, the next main chance, because we don't have money to blow on
the wrong thing.
The wrong thing. Yeah. So, but as you know, one can't wait too long because then the trains left the station. So when we built the app for the radio station, that was a pretty well established. This is a way people are going to start listening and viewing. The next thing that we're actually working on is developing a podcast. We of course podcast many of our radio programs already, but working on a podcast that's specifically around some particular initiative that we can talk about later that we're doing at KRCB, and we're in conversations with NPR One, which is NPR's strictly digital stream, about having that podcast as a part of NPR's stream.
Which would be a real coup.
Coup.
Because their audience is so vast.
It's vast. Yeah. It's vast. We just had at the station yesterday the vice president of programming from NPR. She was in San Francisco doing some visits and said she'd come up and chat with us a little bit. So their audience is vast. Their online audience is enormous. I think 20% of their online audience is international.
That's crazy.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow. Yeah.
So
that's definitely a ship you want to be on, I think.
That's right. That's what I think.
That's great. So you, as we talked before, you weren't initially disposed to being, a media mogul. I mean, politics, but you grew up back and forth between the East and West Coast. Yeah. What were you first interested in? What was your first passion?
Politics.
Yeah.
One of the things that happens when you move a lot, at least it happened for me, was that you have to begin to learn real fast how to get along with other people.
Were you like a military kid?
It might as well have been, but no, it was my father was a civil engineer, and he was designing oil refineries, and he got moved around, and then he threw it all over and decided to join his brothers in Florida running a bookbinding business.
That's great.
Very interesting. Yeah. So you get thrown into all kinds of different environments, and two things happen. You learn how to get along with people real fast and kind of check out the scene. But the other thing is that, and this happened particularly when we moved to the South, and we moved to the Deep South in the early 60s, is that you begin to learn a little more deeply at what makes people tick in different regions of the country.
Yeah.
It becomes more difficult to be dismissive of, those people who live behave like this, and so that the business of politics and how you manage that, whether it's at a regional level or a state level or a national level, became fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And when I was in college, I was at University of California at Santa Barbara, burning down banks, and I wasn't burning down banks, of course, but
that was the era.
It was the era. Yeah. We were there, it took my share of getting clubbed by cops and so on. So, then that gives you another look at wait a minute, I thought this was America. Right. I mean, there's nothing like waking up in the middle of the night and walking out in front of your door and seeing a pickup truck, a big pickup, a skip loader sort of thing, coming down the street with rifles pointing at you. I didn't do anything. I live here. I'm going to school here. Why are you treating? So it was another kind of addition to the wake up call for me.
Right.
And not wake up call. That's a stupid word. Just the education.
Right.
And it also happened that we lived in Miami during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh wow!
So it was not a joke about under the desk, and into the
bomb
shelter.
Was real. Yeah.
Exactly. It was quite real, and you became very engaged and involved in politics at levels that before, as a high school kid, you would never pay any attention to.
Right.
So I think that was just all cumulative, and
I can see why you came to West County.
Yes, calm down, and never move again.
Right.
Well, when I was in college, a friend of mine, her husband decided to run for Congress, and so they asked me to help him to be a scheduler and sort of handler in that way, and we almost knocked off a 20-year congressional candidate, and my candidate, my friend's husband, had burned his draft card publicly, and we almost beat him. So
that's great.
I had the bug.
Yeah.
I had the bug.
And then you went to SSU.
I did. I went to Humboldt State for a semester, and then ended up graduating at Sonoma State.
In political science?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then you've devoted your life to this enterprise, or at least that part of your life was dedicated to that.
Yeah.
And it's a changing landscape. We've talked a little bit about like what's on the horizon. How do you create the energy to persevere? I mean, we all work at nonprofits. It's hard sometimes, and I know over 30 years you're going to see a lot of peaks and valleys. How did you manage to like not give up?
One of the things is that we felt like, and I think we're stewards of a very, very important public asset. A public broadcasting license is a gift for a community our size to have.
Yeah.
Most of them are in big cities or medium-sized cities, and for us to be able to have this, so there was that sense of kind of overwhelming responsibility not to mess it up.
Right.
And also the realization that that if I gave up, and not so much because it's me, but if the first try out of the gate didn't work, it was going to be 10 times harder to try it again, to bring it forward again. So there was that. But there's also the real sense of responsibility to the people who had been volunteering for years to get it on the air, and then the people for whom I was responsible for making payroll.
Right.
And if I didn't, so, and I also, in the early days, had an enormously supportive, and still do, staff that when I couldn't make payroll, I would sit down and say, look, I can't make payroll for everybody, but if you've got to have it because your insurance is going to be canceled, you're going to get kicked out of your house, come and talk to me, and we'll figure something out. I can do a little bit, but I can't do everybody. And everybody respected that.
That's great.
It was so, it kind of gave you kind of like not only hope that we could make it, but also an increasing sense of responsibility. If people are willing to step up like that to make this enterprise work, it wasn't for me, it was for the enterprise of having our own public media.
I could see how that would really cohere the esprit de corps too, because you're really all in it together at that point.
It did. It absolutely did, because it wasn't just, I hear we can't make payroll. It was sit down, everybody talk together.
That's good advice.
Right. Thank goodness that hasn't happened for decades. But there's still that sense that we're doing important work, and that it's meaningful work, and that it's hard, and everybody is pulling their weight, and everybody's doing everything they can. And by and large, 95% of the staff people we've been fortunate enough to have for the 30 plus years have been that kind of person.
That's pretty great.
They're there because they care about it.
That sense of mission, how do you preserve the sense of mission?
Keep saying it a lot.
Really? Because it changes, right?
No, our mission is our mission statement, literally our mission statement is almost identical to the one we wrote 25, 26 years ago.
Can you paraphrase a bit of it?
It'll have to be paraphrased because I repeat it a lot, but I don't have it stitched on the cuff. Basically, what we say in our mission statement is that our goal is to use the telecommunications resources that we're stewards of for improving, informing and educating people to stimulate their engagement in community. We're not interested in getting people to watch television or listen to radio. We're interested in having people listen and watch and get information that causes them to get up and walk out the door and get engaged in their community. It's about using that resource that so often divides us one from the other, isolates people in community. It's about learning how to use that resource to pull people together, to inform and engage them about their community for purposes of making a better community. So that's what
I gotta write that down. That's a great one, though. That's a great mission.
Yeah. And happily, in a lot of ways, communities and society, and certainly public broadcasting, has come in the last 10, 15 years to really understand that we lost, bowling alone, right? Have lost that sense of community, and that all of us have the responsibility to try and figure out how to rebuild it. And again, ironically, the very institution, television, which contributed so much to that isolation, can, I think, be used to bring us back together again.
Let's come back to that in a second. We're with Nancy Dobbs, the president and CEO of KRCB, and this is 707. We're back at 707. I'm Daedalus Howell. We have Nancy Dobbs here. She's the CEO and president of KRCB, and we were talking about using media to foment community. And one of the peculiar things about media these days is that it's often a niche phenomena with these very stratified sort of personal interests reflected by whatever mechanism we use to get them. How does an organization like KRCB kind of wrap its arms around the community at large?
One of the things that we've been doing is we've hired a content manager to try and make sure that whatever we do produce ends up on as many platforms as possible. So that's a start. But basically what we've started doing this about 5 years ago is try and pinpoint one major community issue that seems to be at the heart of a lot of community problems and concerns. And the first one out of the box that we did was healthcare.
Right.
And normally people think healthcare, they think, well, how many doctors and hospital beds and nursing homes do you have in a community? But really what the County of Sonoma about 8 years ago started focusing on were those social issues that were determinants of health. So we followed suit with programming partially supported by the county about homelessness and about high school graduation rate and preschool, quality preschool education.
And looking at that through the lens of health, because it ultimately leads to health issues.
Absolutely. One of the best predictors of what your health and length of life is going to be is whether or not you graduate from high school.
Oh, great.
You didn't graduate from high school. Oh, well. Too bad. We're going to take a cut here, and Daedalus is going to recover himself.
Go get my GED and come back. Okay, great.
So, and early childhood education, of course, you know the county is looking real seriously at funding universal preschool education.
Right.
And that's why, is because the costs at the other end of shortened lives and sicker population and so on, and unhappier lives, is profound. Wow. Much better to invest in those, to invest in 6 months of intensive care at the end of your life. And the costs are about the same.
That's huge.
It's huge. So
you get over the niche sort of media diet that people have developed by finding the one core issue that actually pertains to everyone.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a lightning rod issue that drives everyone back to the...
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other reason why we selected that one is because those are issues that people can do something about in their own community.
Right.
Such as helping build daycare.
Right.
Building sidewalks in front of schools.
Right.
Kids get killed going to school because there's no sidewalks.
It's despicable. I mean, how could that even exist?
And it happened in Santa Rosa 10 years ago. So people can back to our mission statement of people getting involved, using what they learn on KRCB to get involved in the community. We wanted to feed people issues that they could get involved with because they cared about. What's their corner grocery store got in the front of their window? Alcohol and cigarettes or bananas, you know?
Right.
So all of those issues make a difference in terms of health, so that's what we did.
That's brilliant. And so it feeds right back in. So it fulfills your mission, right? It engages everyone and actually has them change the dynamic of their communities positively.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. We're looking for large-scale social change. And if you can't bring the power of public media to that, what's the use of public media?
Is it working?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. We have many more people now recognize that the kind of programming that we're doing, they're funding it, for one thing. We're getting sponsors, businesses who wouldn't sponsor us are, it's so interesting because we always thought, you go out to a business and you say, do you want to sponsor Sesame Street at 5 o'clock or at 6 o'clock? And they'd say 6 o'clock. And now we go out and we don't even ask them that. We say, do you want to support better health in our community? And here's how. Right. And they're supporting it, businesses that would never support us before. So it's working.
If you could predict the future and you wanted to see Sonoma County take shape, sort of aligned with this mission, right? How do you see KRCB participating in that 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Who knows what our media will be, or medium will be at that point?
Yeah, well, I think we all in the business do get caught up with what's the new technology and what's the business going to look like. But I think, as I'm sure you would agree, the content is the thing that's got to drive it. Right. And you've got to know how to produce content that's meaningful to your community, and then look around and say, okay, where's the best platform? If you get platform driven, you forget all about. So our next initiative, which we just launched, is where I think we'll still be in 5 years, is an initiative that we're calling North Bay Bountiful. So what we're doing is we looked around again and we said, what is it that most people in this community are concerned about and paying attention to? Well, climate change. Environmental issues and so on. So we said, what if we put together an initiative that talked about all things that are happening in our North Bay community around resiliency, adaptability, and sustainability, whether it's soil or climate change or ocean acidification. People care about it, and we happen to be in kind of a hot spot in terms of organizations and institutions experimenting with and very forward thinking about what some of the solutions are. It's always been an issue for us of finding those solutions and sharing them with the broader community. So that's what we're doing with this new initiative, very much like Health Connections, and inviting people to become engaged in their community around those issues.
It's almost as if you've templatized a kind of process to create content that really, and the great thing is a lot of your stuff gets picked up by other channels. And I know one of your works ended up on 500 different channels.
Right.
Huge.
That was a documentary we did on the saving of the North Coast, the creation of Port Reyes National Seashore. Even more interesting is our Natural Heroes series, which we started 10 years ago. We just won another Emmy Saturday night.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
oh
so we've now won 8 Emmys on what's got to be the most frugal station programming on all of public broadcasting. And we have more than 50% of the stations in the PBS stations in the country carrying it.
That's great. And that's produced locally, and it keeps winning because it's awesome.
Yeah.
Nancy Dobbs, CEO and President of KRCB, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you come back and catch us up on all the good things that are going on over there.
Thanks a million.
Yeah. Cheers.